Look at all these different sizes of books. What's that all about? Stick around and I'll show you. So as you can see, books come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Now this video is a kind of a follow-on to the last video that I made about storing books. And I want to talk a little bit more about why books are certain sizes. Books really should be a certain size for a reason. Now, if we start with this is a kind of atlas, which means it's obviously got maps inside it. So the pages need to be big, you need to be able to see the details. This is an art book, so once again, you need to be able to see the details, the pages need to be big, and that's fine. And if you had a book like this, which might be a subject like, let's say, the big book of trains or the big book of roses, those are the sort of things which are almost guaranteed to end up as coffee table books, because they're big mainly just for marketing purposes. They sort of put in shop windows so that people think, oh, I know, I'll buy that book for Uncle Jim, that sort of thing. It's, again, I'll come to train books in a moment and I'll show you why train books need to be a particular size, but not necessarily as big as this. So again, look for, when you're buying books of this sort of size, ask yourself the question, do they need to be this big? What is their purpose? We're going to go down in sizes as we go along. This is what you call the Quarto size book. Now it lends itself ideally to railway history books. This is one of a study of a particular railway line, the Great Central, and if you look inside, it has lots of very detailed photographs and also a decent amount of text as well. There's also things like tables here. So this size book, again, is perfectly relevant for this subject matter. This is a slipcase book. It's actually a copy of Three Men in a Boat. Now this is a sort of presentation copy. It's a very nice, attractive version of a classic story. And because it is illustrated, this sort of size lends itself ideally. It's not even necessarily the sort of book that you might read. It's very often books like this are actually given as presents for people because they may love the story of Three Men in a Boat but just want a special copy of it. So for instance, this one is illustrated by Paul Cox. So very attractive. The size is right for what it is. This is a very important size. This is octavo, about 8 or 9 inches tall. It allows for a good text layout with also occasional illustrations. These are what they call plate sections. So you'll get a lump of these illustrations together here. Also look very neat and tidy on the shelf. If you've got a reference library and they're all this sort of size, this sort of format, it looks really very neat indeed. If you see a book like that, generally sort of quite serious subject matter at that sort of size, get these smaller in paperback form, difficult to really to use very well. So if it's this sort of subject that you're interested in, this is really the sort of size you want to stick with. So moving on to novels, there's 3 examples here. This is your standard hardback modern novel, which certainly looks attractive. It's a matter of taste really as to whether it's appropriate for your collection. Some people do like these because of the way they look. Others dislike them because they're fairly large and they don't always fit on the shelves very well, along with their other collections or next to paperbacks. Also, they tend to be a bit heavy, so get a lot of complaints about that. So, you know, if you're reading in bed, it can be a bit tiresome to actually hold this up. The modern standard size paperback is this one here, which is, to my mind, that's about ideal. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's fairly easy to hold, and to me the idea of reading a novel, I personally like to be able to hold a novel in one hand. This is the older format novel, it's an Agatha Christie here, Evil Under the Sun, great story. To my mind, this is actually even better, apart from the slight drawback is that the text can be a little bit smaller, but certainly very nice and handy to hold in one hand. And just hold it open like that, very easy. Now, some of the things about novels that are what I call annoying books are things like this, where they make novels, in fact they call them airport-sized novels. They're just a tiny bit bigger than your standard novel, like this, which can just disrupt the whole pattern of your shelves. So it's one of those things that, why do they do it? This again is a slightly annoying type of book. Stephen King, probably great story, but look at the thickness of it. It's really going to be difficult to hold that open and read it comfortably. Here's another type of, it's the same sort of size novel as the Philippa Gregory, which is this one here, but as you can see, much thicker. I actually find that a bit annoying. I'm a great believer in good editing, so that I like novels which are really no thicker than about this. Staying with novels, these are some much older novels, which I really like these ones. Very nicely put together. This is actually a leather bound one, but it's not really about that, it's about the size. It's the idea that you can hold it very comfortably in one hand. Now, these sort of things were made in the old days. I suppose really they were kind of like the Kindle of the day, because it was the idea that you could just take it with you somewhere. You imagine yourself, just stopping somewhere, waiting for a train or something, and just getting this out and just having a quick read. Then of course you just put it in your pocket or your handbag. Here's a slightly smaller one here. This is a very nice little edition of Jane Austen's Persuasion in the Oxford University Press edition. Again, a little travelling companion, slip into the pocket very easily, or the handbag. You can imagine sitting on a train in a very crowded carriage and just minding your own business, but sitting like this and just being lost in your own little Regency world. So because of the way that it's bound, it's a stitch binding. The pages stay open very easily, so you haven't got to fight with it to keep it open. Now, staying with the theme of travelling, here's three books here which really are, again, they are the size they are because of what they are. First of all, we have a Wainwright's Pennine Companion, which, you'd sort of take this hill walking with you, and very easy, very light, very easy to just get out. Just again, keep it in your pocket or your rucksack or something. If you're walking through a little town or a village, you can just get it out and read a little bit about what the local history is about the town, or the best walks around there. There's another one here which is the Rambler's Companion, and that has a nice cover on it. And here we are. Again, put it in your pocket and just get it out when you get a moment. Here again is something very much associated with travel, and that is a dictionary. This is actually an English-German Wörterbuch, they would call it. So whenever you're stuck for that little word, if you, let's say you might be absolutely dying for a beer and you don't know what the word for beer is. Well, actually in German I think it's actually beer. But I'm sure there's more complicated words than that. But again, just put this in your pocket and just, it takes almost no room at all. So we're going generally down in sizes, but these sort of books actually come much smaller too. They're actually poetry books, or little sort of personal things that you might carry with you, little sayings, little diary books, that sort of thing. very sort of personal things. This is actually a compilation of poetry, but it might be the sort of thing that a young lady, to be old-fashioned, might have actually had secreted away, and she would go and sit on a park bench and just get a little poetry book out and study this, or perhaps have it under a pillow and get this out at night, read it by the candlelight. All these wonderful romantic poets of the day. There's another one which is a rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, very famous verses. This is a very nice leather-bound version. Again, it's that kind of personal thing which is just nice and small and neat, and you know, tuck it away somewhere secret. Now on to the last two, which are devotional books. Now these are fairly small, but believe you me, these can actually come much, much smaller. Reason being that throughout history, people have often had to hide these sort of books, depending on whether it was a Catholic or Protestant monarch. I think people like Mary I, Queen Elizabeth, King Henry, all that sort of thing. So people kind of, you know, did actually hide them away in all sorts of places. But again, very high quality book, easy to hold open with one hand. Typefaces are very clear. You can imagine standing up in church and singing the Psalms, or sitting at home with the light of a candle, or just somewhere private. This one is actually a New Testament, which is again is smaller again, and the text is a bit smaller actually, but you can imagine somebody sitting here in their little secret place, just studying the scriptures. Well, books don't get much smaller than that, or do they? Yes, of course they do. And here's one example I have of a very small book. It's so small you can barely see it. If I hold it up here, if I could afford a cameraman, I'd get him to zoom in on this, but I can't. I'm just going to hold it up for you. But this is, I assure you, a real book. It is a devotional book. It's actually a nativity, and it's so small that you can make it disappear. Well, I hope that's given you some insight into why books are particular sizes. I'll be covering in another video some more about how these sizes came about and how they're constructed, how they're put together. But for now, I'd like to say thanks very much for all of you who've subscribed to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.